I remember that afternoon like it was ordinary, the kind of quiet Sunday that somehow feels special without trying. The sunlight was soft, filtering through the curtains into Dad's kitchen, casting long stripes across the wooden floor. We had just finished lunch, a Father's Day spread that smelled like roasted chicken and fresh herbs, and everyone was lingering around the table, refusing to leave, laughing at the usual jokes that somehow never got old. My sister-in-law was teasing Dad about his obsession with that old lawn mower, and even he chuckled, shaking his head. I sipped my coffee, the steam curling into the air, and felt that calm that only comes from being surrounded by family, where even the small chaos feels safe. My mind wandered for a second, as it always does, to the little things. The creak of the porch as Dad went outside to grab another chair, the clink of plates as Mom stacked the empty dishes, the warm sunlight hitting my arm as I reached for the sugar. I should check my account later. Nothing serious, I thought, just a passing note, because money wasn't supposed to matter today. Right now, it was just about these ordinary moments. The sound of laughter, the smell of Dad's cooking, the feeling of sitting here, just being a part of something familiar. Everything felt easy, and I let myself sink into that comfort, thinking, maybe, for once, things would stay simple. It wasn't anything dramatic at first, just little things I barely noticed at the time. My sister-in-law kept snickering under her breath at some of Dad's jokes, the kind of snorts that feel like they're directed more at someone than at the joke itself. I remember catching her glance once, that quick flick of the eyes toward me, and shrugging it off, pretending I didn't see it. Mom kept fussing over the leftover desserts, moving plates around like a conductor of a tiny, chaotic orchestra, and I thought about how everyone always seemed so busy, so distracted, that nothing serious could ever hide in plain sight. Yet, somewhere beneath the laughter, there was this faint tug at the edge of my mind, a whisper I pushed away. Maybe I should pay attention. Maybe things aren't always what they seem. I brushed it off, telling myself I was overthinking. After all, it was Father's Day. People joke, people tease, and I wanted to stay in the warmth of that simple afternoon. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that some words, some looks, lingered longer than they should. Like the way she leaned just a little too close to Dad when she reached for the dessert, or the subtle smirk when she mentioned needing something. Soon, I kept my voice light, laughing at a comment Dad made about my failed barbecue attempt last week, all while that tiny knot of unease sat in my stomach. It was nothing, just a fleeting thought, but in hindsight, I'd realized later how loudly the silence had been whispering. After everyone started slowly drifting toward the living room to chat or scroll through their phones, I finally slipped away to a quiet corner, my phone heavy in my hand. I told myself it was just a quick check, routine, harmless, but even as I tapped the screen, a flicker of unease ran through me. The room felt quieter somehow, the laughter and chatter muffled by the distance, and I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. "It's fine," I muttered under my breath, scrolling through the usual numbers, expecting the familiar balances, the small reminders that life was predictable and ordinary. My fingers hesitated as I unlocked the app. I watched the loading screen blink for a moment that felt far too long. I glanced toward the window, noticing the sunlight catching the dust in the air, the soft hum of the refrigerator in the background, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, mundane, everyday sounds that suddenly felt charged, waiting for me to notice something I wasn't ready for. My thumb hovered over the refresh button, that tiny, almost meaningless motion that would change everything. I tried to distract myself, thinking of Dad telling that same story about his first car, the way he laughed with a hand on his chest, but my mind kept pulling back to the numbers that would soon appear on the screen. A trivial thought whispered in the back of my head, "It's just routine, nothing's wrong." But deep down, I knew that little voice had no real idea what was coming. When I finally saw it, my stomach dropped so fast I felt like I could sink through the floor. The numbers on the screen weren't just lower than I expected, they were gone. Every dollar, every transaction I'd carefully tracked, vanished like smoke in the wind. I blinked, thinking it was a glitch, my vision narrowing as if squinting harder could somehow fix reality. My hands shook, gripping the phone tighter, and I could hear the faint buzz of conversation from the other room, the clinking of dishes, and yet it all felt muted, distant, irrelevant. No, this can't be real," I whispered, voice barely audible even to myself. My mind raced, cycling through impossible explanations. Maybe the bank, maybe a technical error, maybe someone had taken it. The word felt alien, absurd, and terrifying all at once. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, the sunlight streaming through the window suddenly harsh, glaring. I could feel my pulse in my throat, the air thick, almost suffocating. Every rational thought tangled with panic. I wanted to scream, to shake someone, anyone, to make them see that this violation, had happened. But I was frozen, watching. The numbers, each digit a silent punch to my chest, trying to reconcile the calm of the afternoon with this sudden, impossible emptiness. And then I heard it. The snort. A sharp, almost mocking exhale that cut through the soft background noise of the living room. And I turned slowly, my stomach twisting. My sister-in-law was leaning back in her chair, that familiar smirk on her face, saying in that casual, almost careless tone, "We needed it." My head snapped toward her, disbelief and hurt colliding like waves. Needed it? Needed my money? The words felt like a punch, but worse, they carried a cruel kind of ownership, as if my hard work and trust were simply hers for the taking. My mouth opened, then closed, caught between shock and the urge to shout, to demand, to make her see the reality she had just tried to laugh off. My fingers clenched around the edge of the table, knuckles white, heart hammering in my ears. The room seemed to tilt, laughter from a joke Dad had just made blending into the background like a distant echo. I couldn't look away, couldn't breathe right, caught between rage and the sting of betrayal. Memories I hadn't realized I was holding on to, past favors, shared trust, moments when I believed family meant safety, flashed through my mind. Like brittle glass breaking. And in that instant, the warmth of the afternoon evaporated, leaving me exposed, raw, and painfully aware that something fundamental had shifted. I couldn't stop the memories from surfacing, little shards of trust that now felt painfully naive. I remembered lending her money once, a small amount, thinking nothing of it because that's what family did. We'd sat at the kitchen table, laughing over coffee, and she promised, with a casual wave of her hand, that she'd pay me back soon. I had smiled, believing her, feeling warm in the certainty that family meant loyalty. Another memory hit me. A few birthdays ago, I'd helped organize a gift for her, spending my own money because I wanted her to feel celebrated, to feel included. I'd trusted her then without a second thought, never imagining that one day she'd look at what was mine and justify taking it. The betrayal didn't just sting. It shattered the invisible contract I had built in my mind, the one that said we take care of each other, that family doesn't use family. I could see her, face in my mind, smiling in those moments of innocent camaraderie, and now the same face was lined with entitlement, casual and unapologetic. My chest felt heavy, my throat tight, as I sat there with the phone still trembling in my hands, realizing that my trust had been exploited and the people I'd thought I could rely on were capable of cutting it short without a second thought. The warmth, the calm, the laughter, it all felt like a mirage, a backdrop to the slow, sinking realization that some lessons only hit when the damage is done. I forced myself to breathe, to straighten my shoulders, to pretend like everything was normal, even though my world had just quietly tipped over. I laughed when Dad made another joke, a hollow sound that felt alien in my own ears. My hands rested on my knees, tapping subtly, hiding the trembling, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. I kept my gaze soft, letting it wander around the room, studying the sunlight on the curtains, the way the silverware caught the light, anything that could anchor me to something familiar. Don't show them. Don't let them see. That phrase, repeated over and over in my mind, a mantra against exploding into anger or tears. I thought of walking away, of hiding somewhere quiet, just to let my pulse slow and my thoughts stop spinning. But I stayed, because leaving felt like surrendering, like admitting that they had broken me completely. Every laugh from across the room, every clink of a cup, felt sharp, a reminder that the world outside my head was moving on, oblivious to the storm inside me. And I realized, painfully, that composure itself had become an armor I had to wear, heavy and suffocating, just to make it through the room without losing myself entirely. I repeated their names silently, almost like a test. Dad, Mom, her. And in that repetition, I began cataloging every slight, every look, every laugh that had hinted at this moment long before I even realized it. The mask was in place, but inside, the heat of betrayal still simmered, threatening to boil over at the smallest spark that I finally couldn't hold it in anymore. My voice was quieter than I expected, tight and cautious, as I asked, "Did you take it?" The words hung in the air, heavier than any lunch plate or steaming cup of coffee could ever be. She looked at me, eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and defiance, like she'd been waiting for this moment all along. My chest felt like it was caught in a vice, anger and disbelief clashing so violently that it left me trembling. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room, to make her understand the weight of what she had done, but the room was still alive with the hum of casual conversation, and I had to hold it together. My mind raced through possible confrontations, the lines I could deliver, the threats I shouldn't. But mostly, I felt the cold wash of clarity. I was done pretending. Each second that passed felt like a slow drip of betrayal, reminding me that some people see family not as trust, but as convenience. She shrugged, almost lazily, her smirk unwavering, and I realized that words wouldn't fix this. Truths wouldn't land where intent was absent. I clenched my fists under the table, counting silently to 10, 20, 50, reminding myself that control mattered more than immediate satisfaction. Even though I was furious, even though my heart ached, I started plotting my next steps in silence, knowing that real power wouldn't come from shouting. It would come from reclaiming myself, my boundaries, my life. After everyone had drifted back into their routines, I found myself alone in the quiet corner of the house, the hum of the refrigerator and the faint creak of floorboards under my own weight filling the silence. I sank into a chair and let the full weight of what had happened settle in. The betrayal, the shock, the humiliation, all mixing into a bitter cocktail that made my chest ache. And yet, beneath it, a strange clarity began to emerge. I realized that I had been giving my trust freely, unquestioningly, and that blind loyalty could be exploited in ways I'd never anticipated. The warmth of the earlier afternoon felt like a distant memory, replaced by a sharp awareness that I couldn't rely on others to protect what was mine. But with that clarity came something else, a spark of control. If I couldn't change what happened, I could at least decide how to respond. I traced my fingers over the table, feeling the grooves of the wood, grounding myself in the physical world, reminding myself that I was still here, still intact, still capable of action. I thought about my boundaries, about the lines I hadn't drawn, and the ones I would draw now. I realized that forgiveness might come someday, but for now, my priority was reclaiming myself, emotionally, mentally, financially. And in that quiet reflection, I felt a subtle shift, the first hint that I could move forward without being consumed by what had been taken from me, that I left the house later that evening with a strange mix of exhaustion and determination pressing on my chest. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the yard, and the air felt sharper, somehow cleaner, as if it was urging me to take a step forward. I started making calls, checking my accounts, tracing transactions, plotting the slow, deliberate steps I needed to take to rebuild what had been taken from me. Each action, small as it was, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, a quiet defiance that no snide remark or stolen dollar could erase. I walked through the neighborhood streets alone, letting the wind push against me, the sound of leaves crunching beneath my shoes grounding me, reminding me that the world was still moving and so could I. Thoughts of confrontation, revenge, and anger flitted through my mind, but I let them pass without grabbing hold. They were distractions, not solutions. By the time I returned home, the night had settled softly over the city, and I felt a cautious optimism stirring. I could protect my future, enforce my boundaries, and live without pretending that everyone I loved would always honor the trust I placed in them. And in that quiet, deliberate reclaiming of my life, I felt something I hadn't in hours, maybe even days, a small, steady pulse of empowerment. I was hurt, yes, but I was still standing, still thinking, still moving forward. And that alone was mine to keep.